And it was struck me that how impressive it was that universities were collaborating together, but also with the local archives and the local history, if you like. That is something that is not characteristic, for example, of the UK, and it could be a particular strength that French DH might want to build on. Equally, you know, one of the things, I used to be an academic politician, if you like. I was the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research, which I guess is something like being a Vice President or something in French terms. But anyway, I therefore think about the kind of bureaucratic politics of some of this, but I do think it's actually very important in the context of DH. We, as DH scholars, often find ourselves on the edge of various disciplines, as I was saying, and that doesn't always make us popular, whether with traditional humanities scholars who are worried that we are going to ruin the discipline they love, or perhaps with computer scientists who think that what we do is not really interesting in terms of computer science. So we have to think about what alliances can we make if we want to establish DH and keep it going. So I very much think about, you know, who's going to support this initiative, because if they're not going to stand up and support it, it's probably not going to work, because there will be people who actively will not support it. The two little things I've, the picture of the logo here I've put on are emblematic of that, because I think it's very important to think about what the university itself is doing and how digital humanities might fit into it, and indeed how digital humanities might contribute to it. So this happy little picture here is evidence of our having recruited twice as many female computer science students. I mean, that's the twice as many. You can see how relatively few it is, but nevertheless, the university is trying really hard to increase the diversity of our student body in computer science, and indeed our faculty in computer science, because we were aware that it was so male dominated, and that we really must work harder on that. Equally, that we must work harder in terms of diversifying our student body in terms of race, class, etc. And we are working on that one too. But this is a success. But you know, computer science has been thinking a lot about how women fit into the context of computer science. And we know, for better or worse, that female students tend to enjoy doing digital humanities and things where they can see a meaningful output rather than just tinkering about with stuff. And that's not just me observing it. That's been sort of written about in the research for quite a long time. So this was a priority. Computer science was a priority area for the university. Women in computer science was a priority area, and I'm really grateful to my colleagues in computer science. They really got behind the idea of digital humanities and said, well, this sounds great. We think it sounds very exciting. We would like to make some faculty appointments in digital humanities. We'd like to do some collaborative teaching. How can we work with you? Which I was, you know, absolutely delighted by. Equally at UCL, that little logo is the logo of the UCL Grand Challenges, which was an initiative that was being launched around about the time just before we set up UCLDH, with the idea of fostering interdisciplinary research that, as the name suggests, addresses global grand challenges like global health, and intercultural communication, those kind of areas. And so again, the idea that this new interdisciplinary course might fit in with that initiative was very welcome to the senior management. And you know, we were lucky to happen along at that time. And you know, my former colleague David Price, who is the VP research there, gave us huge amounts of support and help, as did the dean of our faculty. So again, we fitted into a university priority, and we worked hard to see how we could help that. What I tend to find is, you know, not everybody loves digital humanities. As I've said, some traditional humanities scholars are quite worried about it, and it, you know, understandably it causes them some anxiety. My view is that trying to go around and convince people who are unconvinced is not the best plan. best plan is to work with people who are interested and do want to collaborate with you and are interested. And as I say, I don't know if this translates into French at all, but the English expression about success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. The idea being that if you make a success, lots of people will go around saying it was their idea in the first place. And I'm very happy with that. If other people think that DH is their idea, or DH in a particular university is their idea and they were the person that made it possible, and there's several of them, then that's great, because that means we have support from lots of other bits of the university. And if other disgruntled people decide that they want to oppose it, well, it means you've got some people on your side. So that's the politics. Moving on to, how we have to think about, okay, in this world of collaboration between fields, of trying to find a place for digital humanities, what are the students going to need in terms of skills? This is just a nice little screenshot, by the way, of our one of the manuscripts in the Priory Library, which is at Durham Cathedral. And it's obviously digitized here, and it's one of our really interesting collaborative projects in Durham, called the Ordered Universe Project, is working on this particular manuscript because it's about medieval science. And the collaboration is looking at medieval science and particularly how medieval scientists understood the physics of light. And that involved physicists, mathematicians, classicists, historians, and it's produced some amazing material. They've published both in humanities journals and in the top science journals like Nature. So again, I think this is a really good example of how digital resources are integrated into, really, really broad interdisciplinarity. So some of the skills, the obvious ones are things like students need to understand data, whether it's quantitative data in terms of numerical data or qualitative data, that particularly when I am working with users of digital resources, I'm creating quite a lot of qualitative data from interviews and things like that. So students need to understand how to deal with that. And that's probably something they won't be familiar with from arts and humanities. They clearly need computational skills, but they also do need a deep knowledge of the humanities or of cultural heritage practices, or ideally both. And so obviously we have to think about how those can be balanced. But, and I think almost more importantly than that, or certainly as importantly, are the kind of what some people might call soft skills, but I think of them as vitally important, about how do people work in this interdisciplinary world. So how can you communicate with other people, working in teams, working with users, how to collaborate with people outside universities, ideally in cultural heritage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a bit more detail as we move towards the end part of my talk. When we're thinking about these skills, as I've said, in terms of data analysis, we probably assume that most students have not got a great deal of experience in these areas. Obviously, a humanities, an object of study in humanities is data in some ways. A text is data. It's just analog data. A piece of music, an art object is in a certain way data, but we don't think about it like that. And pure humanities students don't really think about that as, they don't think of a painting as data really, unless and until they see a digital reproduction of it. So we have to think in terms of what skills do people need when they leave the course? What have they got when they join it? How much have they been doing technical mathematical type work? We generally find that most of our students come in without very much mathematical knowledge. But equally, have they been working in cultural heritage or information work? This is a picture of one of our archaeologists. Oh, I wish it would stop doing this. Who is digging something somewhere, and I'm not sure exactly who he is, but he's one of our Durham archaeologists. Or are they, are they used to that, or are they used to working in the more traditional? Here are a couple of our humanities students. That's the more traditional kind of humanities seminar, small group discussion style. It might be very different to be going into a practical class with lots of computers. Equally, we found at UCL that we had quite a lot of part-time students, many of whom might well be working in things like libraries or museums. And we also had quite a lot of international students from outside the UK, whether from Europe or whether from further afield, many Chinese students, in fact. And again, that brings a whole different flavor to the way you teach. And in fact, I found it very interesting because in effect, the students in many ways taught each other, because people who were mature students and information professionals would talk about, well, you know, in my library, we do this, or in my museum, we've been interested in that. And people might talk about in their home country, this was the assumption about something digital. And it was fascinating to get this mixture of perspectives. So as I say, in a funny way, I actually think that the easier bit is what we might see as the more kind of traditionally pedagogical things. In other words, what do you teach? What's the balance between technical and humanities content? At UCL, we shared a lot of modules from many departments across the university, you know, huge multiplicity of departments, from anthropology to computer science to engineering to art history, and many other traditional humanities disciplines, because we said that all of the students had to do or could do one module in traditional humanities as well as the digital work if they wanted to. So that brought together a huge, if you like, menu of options, which we had to support the students in deciding what they wanted to do. Equally, as I've said, some students found it hard being taught by computer scientists. We know that at Durham, the vast majority of the content of the course will be in computer science. They will be being taught by people who are computer scientists who assume that everybody has mathematical knowledge and think in mathematical ways. Now, in France, I know that people carry on studying maths largely